I'll start off with some introductions. And obviously, everyone knows who Dwayne is, or they wouldn't be here, probably, but Dwayne will get to go last. Um, I am Michael Valdez Rafanti. I am the chair of Dwayne's dissertation committee. Um, Dwayne was in one or two classes with me. I can't remember which. Definitely comps.
Mm,
I think that was research comps, and I'm not sure. Yeah, that probably was about it.
yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that he wanted to ask me to be his dissertation chair, which I took on the role uh, happily. And it's been a pleasure to work with. And I'm excited that we're at this point. I have been an adjunct uh, at CIS for about 20 years. Taught almost every class you can imagine. But now I'm pretty much just doing dissertation work. Um, and my current job is as provost of a small graduate school called the International Institute for Restorative Practices, and it's based in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Been there since January, and I'm finally moving there now, like as we speak. My stuff is going, and I'm going soon. Um, so let me. I'm gonna maybe turn this over to Connie. Would you like to? I'm sure people know you, but you might as well go ahead and do a brief introduction to yourself.
Well, I guess I'm the old codger here. I've been here a long time. This is my 30th year at CIIS, if you can believe that. I was
Wow.
I was fortunate to meet Dwayne the first year he came and got to know his story, which was powerful, and read lots and lots of versions of different parts of the story. And I have to say, Dwayne, I'm supposed to introduce myself here, so I'll stop talking about you. I'm a sociologist of religion. I teach courses in self-inquiry, which is one of the things that I think interested Dwayne in his research topic. I also teach Eastern religion and self-inquiry through Eastern religious systems. And I live here with my dog Suki, and I'm in Oakland, California. And I think that's enough for me. I teach
Okay.
I teach self, society, and transformation. Excuse me, and that's sociology of knowledge, which is very similar to sociology of religion. Excuse me. Thank you.
Sure. Ilana?
There we go. So I'm Alana Rowe, and I have known Dwayne for, gosh, 20 years, 15 years. I work
14.
at ITP Sophia, where I got to meet and work with Dwayne for a couple of years. Um, and it's been so long that I really don't remember what courses of mine you were in, but I do know that I chaired your thesis that, you know, led to this research and in a way. And he was always such a delight to be with and such an inspiring person and colleague in many ways. Um, I teach, well, right now I'm teaching creativity. I teach eco-spirituality, inquiry into creativity and embodied spirituality, um, among other things, and working with the certificate in transpersonal eco-psychology. And I live at the Eco Village in Ithaca, New York, which feels completely amazing that I got here and found I'm just moving into my house. So my place. That's it for me. Thank you.
Eco psychology in there too. Got to
Thank
get
you.
the spirituality and psychology piece. That were the two biggest classes that I thoroughly enjoyed with you, Ilana. Yeah, it's been 14 years. It's been a
14
while.
years. Okay.
You've witnessed a lot of the journey that I've gone through over the last
Yeah. Well,
2
it's more
graduate degrees and then this PhD, so.
Well, so for the rest of our time together, Dwayne probably will start off his presentation. I'm sure he'll say a few things about himself, and he can certainly talk about why he has the committee that he has and his connection if you would like to. Um, but I think he's planning on about a 45-minute presentation, and then we move into um, sort of an opportunity for the committee to ask questions, comment on Wayne's work, and then time provided that there might be opportunities as well for others to ask questions. There's usually is some time for that, and then we will the committee. It's once all that part is done, we'll go into a breakout room to sort of make a decision in terms of um, whether Wayne passed. I get this is or needs it needs
A
additional
lot of
you know,
improvement.
work or or needs some additional work on his dissertation. So Dwayne, all that being said, do you
Yeah.
want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So, Dwayne Custer, and I'm in Portland, Oregon. This is a 20-year journey for me. So, kind of started back in 2004 with um, leaving Philadelphia and moving to San Diego. And then the experience I had in San Diego in 2006, which I'll talk about a little bit later through a poem that I wrote as part of my dissertation narrative. And experiencing a violent incident there and really kind of awakening to some awareness about my own self and how I was perpetuating some victimization from that event. But then as I dug deeper into the self inquiry process, learning more and more about how I was continuing the victimization from my childhood into adulthood and how all of that manifested as an adult. So, which led me to getting my first graduate degree at Sophia, where I met Ilana in 2012. And then I did a second degree in adult education. And at first, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to use that as, for occupation, that I'll be able to utilize that at a job. And then I realized, oh no, adult education has a lot more ramifications than just that. And tied with transpersonal psychology, which is my first degree, there is a lot of synergy there between how do we help adults move through things like trauma and other psychological, emotional, and spiritual issues they may have and encounter, and not just. So I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community, but not just focused on LGBTQ plus, and kind of marrying those two degrees and helping everybody, just anybody that has experienced some kind of awakening or awareness of how they might be perpetuating victimization. So, and then it kind of segued into transformation, which led me to CIIS and going through the transformative studies program. I would have went back to Sophia to do transpersonal psychology, a PhD, and probably a focus on eco psychology and spirituality, but um, unfortunately, being in Oregon, I couldn't be there. I couldn't attend Sophia as a distance learner, but CIIS did have that approval. So I do have a 45-minute presentation or so. I've kind of practiced it a few times. It does come in around 40 to 45 minutes, and I will share the deck with everybody here. And I have about 5 excerpts from the narrative that I wrote in the dissertation, as well as a review of the findings and the ramifications of the research and the data and the theory, the themes and the patterns that arose from the narrative, which is the data that I used for research. So let me share my screen. There are a few people here that you may not recognize, but I invited a few friends from around the world who are here with us. So all of you will get a chance here later to ask questions when Connie, Michael, and Alana are in a breakout room. But for now, let me see here. Let me sharing the right screen. There we go. Okay. Let me blow this up. Okay. Can everybody see my screen all right? What's is it sharing?
Looks great.
Yes,
Okay.
it's fine.
All right. So in the last couple of days, I've actually changed the title of my dissertation to be a little bit more reflective of what actually the heart and soul of the dissertation, and I've renamed it to Odyssey of Heroes, which you'll learn more about as I go through this presentation, and subtitled "The Transformative Power of Storytelling and Reflective Writing for LGBTQ plus individuals specifically." We already have met Michael and Connie and Ilana, who are my committee, and I just wanted to thank them, obviously, for their support over the last couple of weeks. But I also wanted to thank friends who are no longer with us and friends that are still with us. Their love and support over the last several years has been vital to my growth and development, as well as, you know, being part of the process that I've been going through over the last couple of years and really kind of tailoring the stories that I've been generating or creating from my own life. Also, I think it's really timely just to mention that this October is LGBTQ plus History Month. So, and tomorrow is National Coming Out Day, which makes my presentation a bit more timely, I think. Kind of weird how the universe all works itself out. So I'm going to be spending a large chunk of my time reading from 5 specific excerpts from the personal narrative that I wrote. There's more in the dissertation, but we just don't have the time to go into all of it. And I will also conclude my presentation with the findings and everything, the implications of those findings with everybody. So they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I've come to realize that some pictures have a lot more to say. This is a photo of me a few days after I'd been brutally attacked by a young man in San Diego in 2006. It was on a sunny Sunday afternoon that he hit me over the back of the head with a hammer and demanded that I drop my backpack. I've written this narrative a few times in very different ways. Today you'll get the latest version of this story as a poem that I wrote for this dissertation. The entire event happened in the space of a few minutes, but what I learned from it will stay with me for the rest of my life. It turns out that this picture is not worth 1,000 words. It's worth about 52,000 words, which happens to be the length of my dissertation, approximately. It's a visual representation of all the insights that I've gained over the last 18 years since this incident occurred. So the purpose of my inquiry specifically was to investigate the therapeutic and the transformational characteristics of using reflective writing and personal narrative to become aware of how individuals often perpetuate self-victimization and self-abuse as a side effect of experiencing traumatic events. I also go into or was interested in describing how my own personal process might enable other individuals to move towards a state of self-transcendence and self-actualization. Here I've referenced Joseph Campbell's work, The Power of the Myth series, which can be found on the YouTube channel Kino Lorber. I think they're a production company distribution company. And this is important because Campbell emphasized the importance of realizing individuality through personal and collective mythology. I wanted to note here that self-actualization is an ongoing process of unfolding and discovery that everyone must experience on their own. To facilitate self-actualization, a person must first have their physiological needs met, and that's like food and shelter. And then they must also be in an environment that's conducive to psychological, emotional, and spiritual development and growth. I want to acknowledge that not everyone right now, especially, has the benefit of safety and security, especially in the Southeast United States right now. and around the world where they're experiencing wars and trauma. In that, I recognize that my life has been privileged as a white male in the United States over the last 5 decades. And I just wanted to honor those that may not have that same opportunity and the same privilege. So my primary research question that kind of drove the research and the writing is, how does reflective writing and personal narrative perform as therapeutic processes for LGBTQ plus individuals moving through trauma, from perpetuating self-victimization and self-abuse to integration of that trauma, forgiveness of self for perpetuating self-victimization and self-abuse, building resilience, uh, realizing self-actualization, and then empowering themselves to step into who their authentic selves. There were some secondary questions that also drove this research. There were about 6 or 7 other ones that really helped drive the literature review as well as my narrative, and really what did I want to focus on as I was writing my narratives, and how did I want them to kind of mirror or represent those topics that I wanted to research. The theoretical framework for this, basically the study by using personal narrative and reflective writing, or bringing the unconscious into the conscious, identified the relationship between isolated events from my life and their subsequent meaning within an overall narrative arc as modeled by the hero's journey. From there, I was able to deconstruct and reconstruct the narrative to find meaning and value in traumatic experiences. This is both narrative and constructive ontology, or in other words, the nature of being. Why am I here? Who am I? What is my purpose? And kind of those questions that I think all of us ask at some point in our lives. And it's really important to me, to represent how reflective writing is a really good method or vessel to really understand how we construct our identities and how we may be able to change them, especially in relationship to trauma. So the sample size for this research was one person, myself. The primary population that is served is the LGBTQ plus community. However, it may also have value for a few other areas or disciplines: trauma victims and therapists, creative arts therapists, transpersonal counselors, educators, social workers, and LGBTQ plus outreach specialists. I could have added a lot more here to this list, but I felt these were the top 6 that were primary to me and my experience over the last several decades in transpersonal psychology, as well as in education, adult education, and the LGBTQ plus community. So my research design is scholarly personal narrative. It's fairly new methodology. Around 2010, 2011, Nash and Bradley kind of really crystallized what SPN is and how it's effective as a research methodology. They have a 4-phased approach to investigating and research, which is the pre-search phase. And in this phase, this is where I prepared to write my personal narratives by capturing snippets of stories and experiences on paper. In other words, they were kind of like mini memoirs. And then in the me search phase, I composed the full narratives over a period of several weeks. In the research phase, I incorporated scholarly literature from other researchers and academics that validated and debated the processes and concepts that were posited in my narrative. It wasn't just important for me to validate everything that I was saying, it was also important to debate what I have been discovering, because there might be other ways or other perspectives of looking at the research and what I discovered. And then in the we search phase, this is where we want to find or share with the world the general and universal implications that are gained from the research. So I also utilize the hero's journey kind of as my narrative arc, which we'll see here in a little bit from the excerpts that I will be sharing with you. as well as tapping into Jungian psychology, which is basically what the hero's journey is built from. And we'll look at the psychological, spiritual, and emotional aspects of the hero's journey. Their kind of metaphorical phases that that an individual may experience throughout their lives, and they can experience them. These phases that I have up here on the screen, um, going from the ordinary world to the special world or the extraordinary world, which is what I like to call it, and then back again. This could be a spiral where we may experience the hero's journey many times throughout our lives, or we may only have the opportunity to experience it one time as an arc of our overall life, depending on how aware we are of the experiences that we've been through. Um, I won't go into each phase of these, but what's really important is that understanding that we all kind of the hero begins in what is known as the ordinary world or the known. What do we know as knowledge in our minds and what we've experienced? Those things are the kind of the foundation of an adventure or transformative experience that the hero will go on. And when I say hero, I'm not just referencing males. I also mean female as well. It can be heroine as well as hero. It's not exclusive to a gender. So I just wanted to call that out too. As we move out of the ordinary world, there's usually a call to adventure, some kind of an experience, maybe a problem or some kind of event that happens that really kind of wakes us up. And oftentimes we see that there might be a refusal to the call, that we don't want to actually learn more about that event in terms of how it may have affected us psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, we might meet a mentor that helps us move into the extraordinary world and to really begin to discover the unknown aspects of our psychology and our spiritual and emotional psyches. This is also sometimes a physical experience, journey, if you will. So a lot of the time, the primary ordeal or event that may happen is a life-threatening illness, for example. In my case, it was a crime that was committed against me, and also several experiences as a child that I went through, traumatic experiences. So, but I'm really focused on the psychological, spiritual, and emotional. Once the hero has faced their monsters psychologically, moved into those dark caves and have fought those demons, they're able to move back out and claim the reward in, um, uh, in mythology, it's usually the hero gains a sword or some kind of a magic elixir or a potion, and they are able to go back then through the ordeal. They are resurrected as a new person, a new being, because of the awareness that they applied to their experience, and then they return to their community. In this case, for me, it's the communities that I share with the LGBTQ plus Q plus community, as well as academics and other social communities that I'm a part of. So, and we share that wisdom that we've gained from the journey along the way. So, over 10 weeks, I collected and I wrote narratives which share personal accounts of the tragedy and transformation that I experienced. And these narratives include prose, poetry, and some short stories from my childhood through adolescence and adulthood. They create a narrative arc beginning in the ordinary world or the known for me, and moving through what became the extraordinary world or the unknown, and back again. So exploring my subconscious and realm, and really bringing that to the surface and understanding it within the framework of the mind and thought. Sometimes I do quote a few individuals throughout my dissertation that go even beyond that, where they're outside of time, outside of thought and the mind, and experience just being in the moment, in the present. Two of them being Jiddu Krishnamurti, who I've been following for over 20 years, his teachings and philosophy, and then Eckhart Tolle is one of my top kind of mentors, if you will, and Joseph Campbell. So I have prepared 5 narrative excerpts that demonstrate my move from the ordinary world through the extraordinary. And since this is a narrative dissertation, I will be reading them to you. I don't have video or photographs, but I just ask that you be, patient with me reading through the excerpts and sharing with you the stories. Some of them are very raw, and if you find yourself, feel free to go off camera if you find yourself aligning or empathizing with the stories in your own way and experiences you may have been through. I don't want to traumatize anybody by sharing my stories. So the first excerpt that I wanted to share with you is from the ordinary world of my early childhood and a traumatic event that I experienced. During the chaotic last moments of my father's life, he beckoned to his two children to come to him for a hug as he knelt in the stone gravel driveway of his friend's home. The stones were cold and lifeless themselves. The air around my father was icy, and the light of the sun was fading away. It was as if the earth knew this unfortunate soul was dying, and like a staged play, adjusted the lighting and atmosphere to fit the mood. My brother slowly walked up to my father, embraced him, and then returned to my mother's side. Then my father looked me straight in the eyes. I was terrified by what I saw and refused to go to him. He wasn't my father anymore. He was a fragment of the human he once was, and his life force was fading. The moment passed as suddenly as it had emerged, and my father was lost to his own crazed thoughts about what was happening to him. Perhaps in his mind he was wrapped in a warm blanket, unable and unwilling to recognize his organs beginning to shut down and the breath of life slowly being drawn out of him. I knew, even as a 5-year-old, somehow I knew. The second year of elementary school was especially hard for me, and I exhibited signs of a person suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. No one demonstrated how to grieve the loss of my father as a child, and I lashed out at the world the only way I knew how: self-harm and abuse. I would hit my head against brick walls, shove sticks and thorns up my nostrils, and retreat from social activities to sit in a corner. The school counselor and nurse were soon notified about my behavior, and I was forced to go through psychological treatment. I felt helpless and alone in a world that wanted to diagnose and categorize me and shove pills down my throat. Even at the age of 7, I was aware of the futility of the psychologist trying to understand my mind through Rorschach tests. I didn't have the words to convey my emotions with adults, and I was repulsed by their behavior, further driving me into my own inner world. How does a 7-year-old child share his sadness and grief over the death of his father? How does a 7-year-old little boy tell an adult that he has feelings for another little boy on the playground? How does a 7-year-old child understand any of these things by himself? My ordinary world in 1977 was anything but ordinary. I just didn't know it at the time. Everyone assumed that something was wrong with me, including myself, but had no idea how to fix it. My mother attempted to push me towards religion, specifically Christianity. My psychologist offered diagnosis and treatment, but eventually my mother would ignore it and ended my counseling sessions within a few months. My grandparents attempted to convince my mother that discipline was the best solution for a stubborn child. Society endeavored to force me, a square peg, into a round hole. Society didn't care, and it certainly didn't feel like community. It was a culture that demanded contrition and a willingness to be manipulated and conditioned by it. Psychological, emotional, and spiritual freedom were alien to the ecosystem I grew up in, and if anyone crossed its boundaries, they were labeled and ostracized. So much for feeling part of a tribe. I was quick to learn that I was an alien in a foreign land. I was an other. The second excerpt is also from the ordinary world, An Attraction to the Divine. I recall the air at Roxbury Holiness Camp, or the camp, was often filled with the scent of thick scent of pine. It didn't have the same exhilarating potency of evergreens in the winter. It was more like the dry and dusty aroma of a stick of incense. It was the perfect environment for the cedar and fir trees to inform everyone of their presence. I would breathe in the intoxicating scent and smile. It was good to be out with nature, and my eyes uh, gleamed with joy. The hot summer breezes of August, when the religious conventions would occur, were laden with humidity and failed to offer reprieve from the heat, even though the camp was nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains outside of Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. The primary building on the site was known as the Tabernacle, harkening back to a time when stories were told by the light of a fire on a clear moonlit night. The Tabernacle had large ground to ceiling shutters that, when opened, would allow warm wind to waft through the facility. Many weekday and weekend visitors who attended the 2 week event would find themselves napping on the long wooden pews after lunch. Other attendees that had rented cabins would retreat to the nearby stream and shade of the woodland. I both loved and loathed the camp. I loved the chance to be with nature and to explore the wilderness. I loathed the idea of sitting in the tabernacle, listening to old white men preach about fire and brimstone, especially on days when sinful homosexuals were mentioned. I loved the colorful biblical stories like Noah, Moses, and David because I wanted to be like them. They were the superheroes of ancient times. I also loathed those stories because they were used to groom children into a world of patriarchy, sexism, racism, and homophobia. I loved the chance to experience the world in new ways. I loathed the idea that only one worldview was espoused and accepted. All others were morally wrong. I loved the chance for self reflection in the tabernacle, the woods, and while eating Neapolitan ice cream. I loathed the hateful vitriol that would inevitably arise from any number of charismatic preachers and guest speakers. There was no room for self reflection during those speeches. So, this third excerpt is me entering into the extraordinary world as a young person, the first ordeal. After several years of childhood sexual abuse, my anger slowly boiled until one day it overflowed. I recall the day I not only came out to my mother as a young gay person, but I also revealed that the person she had been dating during that time had been sexually abusing me. My hatred towards the abuser notwithstanding, I felt it was time to expose my mother to the truth of the situation. Her son was gay, and her partner liked to sexually abuse young boys. It was during a heated argument between myself, my mother, and her partner that motivated me to come out with it. It was a weapon I chose to use at a point in my life that I greatly needed to strike out at my abuser, my mother, and the world. For so long, I had been hiding in a shadow, a dark corner of the world where my authentic person could not be revealed. This fear was preyed upon by monsters and creatures who wore the skin bags of human beings. Dark thoughts and traumatic experiences within them lived to perpetuate pain, anger, and a need to lash out. These monsters posing as humans were in my family, at church, at school, and in the neighborhood. They were everywhere. Thus began my journey into a dark night of the soul. A proverbial cave lay before my path as I walked through a new and alien world with no map or compass to guide me. I was alone for all intents and purposes, not knowing who or where to turn. What I could not and did not realize at the time was that I was meant to be on this path, no matter how dark it may get. I was meant to walk into a cave that was before me, no matter how frightening it seemed. I wouldn't understand that until much later in life. For now, the 14-year-old boy was taking his first steps into a larger world, and it would be terrifying and liberating at the same time. The revelation that her son was being sexually abused did not register with my mother the way I thought it would. She could not comprehend it psychologically or emotionally. She was incapable of making decisions that would benefit her child, such as contacting the right authorities to investigate. She closed her mind to those ideas and looked at me with disgust in her eyes. In a twisted way, I would become the scapegoat for her anger, not the perpetrator. In her mind, I was the one who had started the abuse. I was to blame for the actions of an adult. Why my mother chose to deny what was happening to me, I will never know. I can only assume she was terrified of being abandoned again by a man. She had already experienced it once with my father's death, and again with my grandfather's passing in 1980. My grandfather's passing had a powerful impact on my mother's mental health, and she regressed into childhood memories and events from her own past. Her grip on reality was foggy, and the future she imagined was tinged by the apocalyptic visualizations she recited from the Bible. This fourth excerpt is called Crossing the Threshold. This is really one of the pivotal moments of my life that kind of propelled me down the path that I'm, as an adult, that I am currently on right now. Some of the coldest days of the year are not caused by environmental temperature. The circumstances of a particular day can create a frozen landscape of emotion. Nothing can warm the heart when there seems to be no options. The darkness creeps into the corners of one's mind and encroaches on the light of joy, peace, and purpose. This was how I found myself on a dismal fall day at the age of 19. I was alone and felt abandoned by family and friends. Even God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, one word, could not comfort me in a time of duress. My mother had left for work early in the day and would not return until early evening. I wanted to go to the local mall, but could not find anyone to go with. My friends were off doing other things in preparation for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, I was tired from attempting to integrate seemingly opposite and hostile identities within myself. I needed one identity to provide solace and comfort. I needed the other to satisfy carnal desires and needs. Two great warriors fought day and night within my consciousness, but the energy to sustain the battle was waning. I wanted it all to end. The local drugstore was within walking distance from my mother's apartment. I hesitate to call it my apartment or even home because it felt like neither of these were true. It was a place for me to sleep and read, like a temporary hostel for the transient. The place felt alien as I grew older, and I longed for something to change. At the drugstore, I bought a can of Pepsi, Reese's peanut butter cups, and a package of sleeping pills. I wanted my last meal to be something tasty. I wanted it to satisfy the little child inside of me, the child who sat chewing bubblegum while watching his father taken away in an ambulance many years prior. Taking my bag of treasures, I walked to a nearby pond located next to the Shippensburg Community Center. Here, I wanted to be with nature and take in the smells and sounds of the earth. If it was to be my last day on the planet, then I wanted to experience the energy of Gaia. I opened the Pepsi and took a gulp. Then I tore into the Reese's peanut butter cups. One delicious bite at a time prolonged the inevitable. I had time. I had what I needed. I had finished my Reese's cups and only one thing remained in the bag. Little white pills looked up at me. Each had a set of eyes that asked, when? I removed the pills and popped them out of their aluminum beds one by one. It was a 60-count package. It was going to take a while to swallow them all. 60 sleeping pills to swallow, one for each painful memory of my young life. It seemed appropriate and ironic at the same time. One down, 59 to go. By the time I had gotten to about half of the package, my stomach couldn't handle anymore. The combination of the sickly sweet soft drink, candy, and pharmaceuticals made me a bit nauseous. I walked back to the small dark box of my mother's apartment and sat in my bedroom like an animal waiting for the hunter. And then the fifth excerpt is actually a poem. It's called The Second Ordeal. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's all about the experience that I went through in San Diego back in 2006. The sun danced in the sky of San Diego, blue reflected like the oceans of an archipelago. Palm trees swayed, veils of a bride. Warm light touched my skin and I sighed. Enya sung an uplifting melody to wed, thoughts of the day as they danced in my head. Children played on the swing sets nearby. Parents looked after them with an eagle eye. My feet carried me across the land, needing to roam back to the little room I called home. Flickers of scenes played before my eyes, artifacts from a film demanding to be theorized. A lesson, a message, some kind of enlightenment, perhaps none, and perhaps all bewilderment. I continued my path, not really paying attention, unprepared to grasp the unfolding situation. To my left appeared a white vehicle with two shapes, my peripheral hearing registering tire scrapes. Maybe they were heading to the park, like the families already there, wanting to leave their mark. I ignored their presence and thought nothing of it, not wanting to assume their motives, I had to admit. When out of the blue, a ball hit my head, a whump and a thump, and my skull quickly bled. An inner voice screamed, "What the hell?" An outer voice whimpered, "Did you hear that bell?" Warm liquid poured down the nape of my neck, trickling sticky gooiness as it made its trek. I turned around, and before me a young man started to dance, back and forth on his feet, taking an aggressive stance. In his hand he held a tool and a weapon of pain, a hammer for nails and smashing the brain. That was it. It was not a cannonball, I surmised, still overwhelmingly shocked and surprised. He yelled at me to drop my backpack. I obeyed for fear of receiving another crack or smack. Would he try to use my face as a board for his hammer? I did not want to give him time to clamor. Down to the ground my backpack fell, containing a book, The Peaceful Warrior, with ethics to tell. Would the thief read the book, or would he just take the cash? He chose both and ran off down the sidewalk in a dash. Awaiting him at the corner of the next street, a white four-door car with his accomplice to greet. Off they tore, away with my money, disappearing behind buildings and leaving me slummy. My feet dragged me to a church nearby. Ironic, I thought, that here I was again to fight a battle I had already fought. People surrounded me like shadow demons and fairies, asking me if I'm okay and calling for beneficiaries. I looked to my right and was mesmerized. Sorry. I looked to my right and was mesmerized by the intensity of green, plants that grew at the base of the church, witnessing the scene. They enveloped me with their love and bright joy, causing me to remember and reflect on the days I was just a boy. My father, as well, had played with life like a gambler, a rambler, who could not escape death the strangler. Again, I was repeating my dad's death as a ballet, pirouetting along a two-lane highway. What unresolved trauma did I contain? What troubling new experience would I retain? With whirling lights and screeching siren, an ambulance arrived like an unsightly cairn. It contained its container filled with instruments of healing and death, ready to conduct me across the river of Lethe. Put him in a neck brace, the attendants proclaimed. Box him up, shut him up, and leave nothing unconstrained. Off to the hospital we raced, with eyes closed and mouth laced. They injected me with morphine, oxycodone, or some kind of meme, causing me to compliment the male nurse during a delirious dream. He was cute and kind, and I was in a trance, never one to give up an opportunity, never one to pass up a chance. Into the magnetic resonance imaging tube I was slid, confined by medical restraints and the images under my own eyelid. Stitches applied and neck brace removed, I was placed in a cold bed, and there I would stay overnight to be sure I was not dead. Intravenous needles pumped drugs and other chemicals into my veins, healing the cells but ignoring the heart, the mind, and soul full of chains. There I stayed, contemplating the performance from a stage, filled with anger, filled with sadness, overflowing with rage. What would bring a person to the edge of madness? What would bring a person to the land of badness? In a cave, the monster lurked, deep within my psyche, waiting to pounce, to scratch, to claw its way to God Almighty. The cave was within, and I was the monster, an oblation. I was the culprit who bathed in remorse, regret, and victimization. I was the criminal with a hammer in his hand, beating my victim, myself, over and over again. After a second trip through the tube, I was deemed fit for release, to move among the living again and be advised to go in peace. I wrote my feelings into the discourse, washing away the red. I weaved my thoughts into the stream of consciousness with thread. I considered over many days and nights of crying. I analyzed the events in meditative writing. Epiphany visited me one bright morning as the sun rose high, offering me thoughts of joy, victory, and a powerful ally. I had a choice to either continue to be harmed or I could surrender the burden and be reformed. So with that, I kind of emerged or was, metaphorically resurrected as a kind of a new person after that event, and experienced a whole different way uh, of looking at the world in my life over, a period of about 34 years at the time. I was 36. And it really helped me dive more into the works of Krishnamurti as well as Eckhart Tolle and others, spiritual mentors, and as well as looking at academics and the research into our psychologies and trauma and things like that. So after writing the narratives, I analyzed and codified patterns that arose from that data with an intentional focus on what are the generalizable and repeatable themes that I could share with myself, that I could discover for myself, but then share with others. Future researchers may find the research rewarding and want to expand on the existing knowledge and findings by studying a more diverse population of LGBTQ plus individuals. This could be in the form of collaborative autoethnography or looking at various autobiographies of other LGBTQ plus individuals who may have experienced something very similar and wrote about it. So that whole process of self-reflective writing. Analysis and codification of my data revealed 9 yet interconnected themes. And what I'd like to spend the rest of my time with you here is discussing those 9 themes. They are reflective writing as therapy, relationship to time, to self, and to others, and what that implies, identity deconstruction and reconstruction, transformative qualities of writing, and then self-forgiveness and gratitude, resilience, and then finally, for me and for this dissertation, self-actualization. One could argue that you can go beyond that, transcendence and other ways of being, but for the purposes of this research, I stopped at self-actualization within the world of thought and the mind. So reflective writing as therapy is really important as one of the first primary, implications from the research. And this is really looking at intrapersonal intelligence and being able to be mindful and aware of oneself, especially when we are self-victimizing or abusing ourselves without even being aware of it. Interpersonal intelligence is one of 9 different types of intelligence that has been identified by Gardner in their theory of multiple intelligence, which also includes visual spatial intelligence. So there's not just like, book learning, but there's so many different ways that we can be intelligent. Visual spatial, linguistic and verbal, logical, mathematical, body kinesthetic, which I really love, body movement and dance and things like that. Musical, obviously, is an intelligence. Interpersonal, which is relationship with others. Intrapersonal, which is really important to me, or that relationship with myself. Naturalistic, which is the environment, our earth, Gaia, the universe, animals and plants. Non-human relationship and intelligence. And then existential is one of the most recently proposed additional intelligences. And existential is basically that spiritual perspective on life and having those higher transpersonal experiences. Reflective writing also as a therapy also has the potential to heal wounds of the mind, the body, and spirit, but also has the ability to heal physical wounds, such as high blood pressure and anxiety and things that lead to perhaps heart conditions and other forms of disease. It is a willingness to question normality. What is normal, and what are my conformed beliefs, and can I change those belief systems? It is an ability to reclaim one's life by rewriting our relationship to the past, not trying to change the past, but to change how we perceive it and how we relate to it in the present moment. Integration, coherence, and meaning making. This is the crux, the foundation of what is known as narrative identity. This is integrating trauma into our lives through narrative, finding coherence or an order amongst those disparate events, seemingly disparate, and then also finding meaning among them. What do those events mean to me as a human being, psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally? The second implication or finding is relationship to time. This is moving from past negative and future transcendental to past positive, future positive, and extended present mindsets. This is based on some of you who have a background in psychology may know Philip Zimbardo, but he has formulated this thing called time perspective theory. I won't go into the entire theory, but it's really important to kind of emphasize here what these 5 different mindsets mean. So past negative is viewing the past from a pessimistic or defeatist lens and often correlates to depression, low self-esteem, and aggression. And then future transcendental views the future through the lens of receiving a reward after death and can lead to irrational behaviors such as suicide and extreme heroism. So those were 2 very powerful mindsets that I had as a young child and an adolescent. I viewed the past through a negative lens, and I viewed the future as an opportunity, a reward, if I was able to get to it, instead of looking at the past in a positive lens, which is viewing the past from a positive and constructive lens, and often correlating this to high self-esteem, friendliness, and lower anxiety, which ties into physical value as well. Future positive is individuals demonstrating a mindset that the future has unlimited possibility, and often these individuals have a more rational decision-making style. And then expanded present, which I really have really thrived in the present moment, not thinking, looking at how the past and the future are a psychological construct in the present moment, but basically extended present balances the past and the future in the present through mindfulness, reflective writing, and meditation. The individual creates temporal coherence among past events of their lives and the future by using the present as a bridge to communicate their knowledge and wisdom about who they are and what they are. Relationship to self was really important. Experiencing self-awareness by seeing oneself across time and space in relationship to experiences. Discovering personal agency and having control over our lives. Many people that go through trauma are led to believe through the trauma that they no longer have control over their lives. They are not the pilot anymore. They are not in the driver's seat. Identifying opportunities to reconstruct events. This is the transformative aspect of self-reflective writing. Making meaning from chaos through redemption and thematic coherence. Seeing our lives not as disparate events from the past, but a thread, a narrative arc, and seeing the themes and coherence throughout those events. And then relationship to others as far as relationship goes. So we have relationship to time, to self, and then to others. This is self-reflective writing, and being able to use that helps reduce emotional burden by relinquishing anger, hatred, and resentment. Enhancing healing by changing one's perspective. Promoting forgiveness when appropriate. It's not always appropriate, especially when we're talking about forgiving others who may have committed a crime against us. This is really important, though, for forgiving ourselves, more of self-victimization and self-abuse, perhaps, if that is happening. Improving relationships over time is really beneficial. We can improve all relationships, but we can improve some by changing our perspective through self-reflective writing. Breaking the cycle of trauma, which is really important, and the perpetuation of abuse. That's I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because we may continue trauma subconsciously in our own lives, but then extended to others as well. Identity deconstruction and reconstruction happens through self-reflective writing, and many of you may already be aware of that as creative artists. Creative arts therapists or someone who's worked in transpersonal psychology is very aware of how we can identify or deconstruct and reconstruct our identity. Because what is identity other than the thought and perspective we have about ourselves? Dialogue. So some of the highlights that percolated from this are dialoguing through reflective writing with oneself, which is kind of like something like known as a life story interview, which is basically asking oneself open-ended questions as a method of discovery. And this applies not just in our social lives, but also in occupationally and academically. Asking open-ended questions always leads to more fruitful results, because then we can really drill down to what is the primary need that I'm looking at. And then personal narratives serve as psychological, sociological, mystical, religious, and cosmological, philosophical vessels of transformation. And those four are really important. In my own narrative, I found I was able to touch on each one of these areas and see how my personal narrative reflected psychological, sociological, mystical, and cosmological or philosophical points of view. Transformative qualities of writing. So then this is the reshaping perspective of past, present, and future through successive retelling, reshaping, and restoring one's relationship to experiences. Building community through shared experience, which is really important when not only in our social relationships, but also and communities, but also in occupationally, academically. Creating space to explore intersectionality of identity and experience. Who am I based on the experiences that I've gone through? And do I have to be the person that I think I am? I have a little magnet on my refrigerator that says, "Don't believe everything you think," which is really important, because when we're caught in the mind, in the trap of thought, we often get caught up in thinking we are who we think we are, when that's usually not true, actually. We can be other people. We can be other beings. And then this is also fostering effectiveness in therapeutic settings. So creative arts therapy specifically, and narrative therapy. Excuse me. Self-forgiveness then and gratitude was very important as a finding from the research. Facilitating emotional healing by releasing anger, resentment, and bitterness associated with past hurts or transgressions. Again, I didn't go into the physical values and benefits of self-reflective writing in this dissertation, but it's just as important to see how it could lower blood pressure and really be beneficial to our physical health. But for me, I'm really focused on the emotional, psychological, and spiritual values that self-reflective writing has, and the process of self-forgiveness and having gratitude for going through the events that we had and the awakening to the value of those events. This is also empowering the individual to take control of their emotional responses and break free from the grip of negative emotion. This is also paving the way for reconciliation and restored relationships by promoting greater harmony and connection with others and with ourselves, reducing stress levels, like I mentioned earlier, and promoting overall well-being of our psychological, spiritual, emotional, and physical beings. And then fostering self-compassion and self-acceptance by leading to greater psychological resilience, which happens to be the 8th of my 9 findings. Reflective writing enables individuals to integrate trauma into their life stories by reclaiming identity, authentic identity, and constructing narratives of growth and transformation, which is, again, going back to coherency and agency, or having control over one's life and one's narrative. And then finally, self-actualization, again, when an individual has the safety and security to be able to have introspection and self-reflection in a very deep way. This is where self-actualization begins to percolate over time. It's a journey, it's a process of unfolding and discovery of oneself. It is also the exploring and reconstructing of one's life story to promote a sense of identity and purpose, which really has value as we move forward through the present into the future, quote unquote. The future is always in the present, which is ironic, but I won't dive into that. But this is an opportunity for us to promote a sense of identity and purpose in the present, and clarifying values and priorities to align our actions and our decisions with what truly matters to us, and being able to reveal that. Taking ownership of personal narratives and beliefs and rewriting our stories in ways that reflect one's authentic self and aspirations, and tapping into creativity and expressing oneself freely without judgment. And then finally, making sense of experience, positive and negative, and finding meaning in one's life. This is kind of the culmination of the hero's journey, Jungian psychology, as well as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where self-actualization is at the pinnacle of the process and journey over time. If, as I mentioned, an individual is lucky enough or fortunate enough to be in a safe, secure environment to evolve and develop into that. So finally, implications then from the research, just to kind of summarize those 9 points, changing an LGBTQ plus individual's relationship to time, self, and others, creating awareness of how our identity is constructed, can be deconstructed and reconstructed over time, utilizing reflective writing to radically transform our psychological, emotional, and spiritual belief systems and processes, which also lends itself to our political, ideological, social, other forms of systems that we may be tied into unconsciously, and we can begin to see those things consciously. Extending forgiveness and gratitude to self, which is grace, and to others, which is kindness. And then finally, building, or I shouldn't say finally, but also building and strengthening resilience against future trauma and troubling experiences that we will inevitably experience. Finally, I did have some limitations in this research, mostly that stem from self-data. Because of the studies limited to self-data, most of the subsequent interpretations and translations were subjective. To address this concern, I did reflect upon each narrative over a period of 10 weeks, and I shared the stories with close friends and colleagues to gain their feedback and insights, especially those who may have witnessed some of the events that I shared with you in those excerpts. And last but not least, I have recommendations for future researchers. We need more LGBTQ plus stories to be written and shared with the world, to broaden the landscape of data we have and to give voice to disenfranchised communities across race, gender, and our own belief systems. These stories may begin to fill the intersectional gaps that are currently missing from society. We need individuals who are ready to go on their own hero's journey into the extraordinary world of their lives and celebrate their resilience, strength, and transformation by sharing their personal narratives with others. I have my references here, and then I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for attending and for letting me talk for the last 45 minutes. And Michael, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you. Um, so what I'd like to start off with maybe is for each of the committee members, including myself, just to share a couple words of appreciation of what, for your presentation. I'm sure there's lots of appreciation. And then we'll go into sort of any questions that we might want to pose to you. I have a couple, and we'll sort of take it from there. So, yeah, I'll start just by saying that, I appreciate it so much. But I will say that one of the core things and it just sort of came up toward the end, where you talked about limitations, in terms of it being very personal, subjective, but at the same time, and maybe it's because I'm a gay man. I mean, how I can relate to it so much. But I do think that what you wrote really transcends the individual and really talks about what it means to be human in a lot of ways. And I think that in some ways we can all access your story. So that transcendent. And then also, I think, you're in a PhD in transformative studies, and, you were right in that wheelhouse of talking about transformation and transformational events, but also purposeful, intentional paths toward transforming trauma or self-hate into something positive. So those were my main appreciations for your work. Um, Ilana, would you like to share something?
Wayne, I really, really, really love the study. I've read a lot of studies in my life, and I was incredibly absorbed with this particular one. Your stories really speak to the. Let me say, how do I say this? Your stories speak for the research by itself. I hope you make this a memoir because I think what Michael said, it does relate to everybody. It's not just the particular population you wrote for. It's particular poignant for that population, but it also. I mean, as you were talking, I was going, oh. Well, I remember this thing in my life, and this thing in my life, and this thing, and it really was so universal. But it was a juicy dissertation. It wasn't just an academic head thing. There was so much heart and soul in it, and there was so much of the transformative story in it. And your writing got better and better and better every chapter. And I just want to appreciate that because it was a wonderful piece of writing, and so thank you for that. That's all I'll say.
Thank you.
Connie.
Well, I have a lot to say, but I'll try to curb my enthusiasm. I have a lot of for you, Dwayne. First thing I want to say is I'm very grateful that you had the Sri Yantra in the corner of each and every frame of your PowerPoint. Thank you. It wasn't missed on me. That's the first thing. Second thing I think is I wanted to say that I think SPN was created for you. You have brought that method to such a clear embodiment. Thank you for that. I've seen other people try to make it happen, but it just seemed to be, it just flowed. And then I want to say that I think the bringing in the hero's journey was beyond inspired. It was super inspired. So thank you for that. And then I want to pick up on exactly what Ilana said, which is that your writing is not good. It's actually magnificent. I mean, the way you can tell things, I would call it touchingly precise. Your speech, your the way you use words is touchingly precise, and I want to reinforce that phrase because I think that's very important to recognize that you are not just telling an ordinary story, you're telling a story of transformation. And you tell it so beautifully that everybody gets it. There was never a paragraph when we were bored or when we weren't following you. So that really cannot be overemphasized, I think, because I'm a person that's interested in writing styles. So thank you for that. Then I'd like to say a little bit more about the spiritual transformation that occurs when one moves from victimization from self-victimization. One understands victimization and self-victimization and then moves into transformation. That's a spiritual journey, and it certainly can only be done through self-inquiry. So you've given a new flavor to the whole notion of self-inquiry. You've given a richness, and maybe that's enough for me right now. I mean, I can go on if you want, but I just want to say that there's a great deal to be appreciated here, and we
could be here all day because there's a lot of
I'll
your
just
work
shut
in
up.
self-inquiry and Ilana's work that she has done as well, and Michael, having being part of the LGBTQ plus community specifically, but also the work he's doing in inclusivity and everything. It's just, yeah, we could be here all day.
Okay, it's over for me. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And I think both Ilana and Connie might be good people to write little blurbs for the back cover of your book once you get it done. Um, Touchingly precise. I love that. I've never heard that before. And that's remember, don't keep those that's a great thing to remind yourself while you're writing is never easy. So just remind yourself that you know what, I can be touchingly precise when I put my mind to it. Um well, I'll start off and now we can ask some questions. And honestly I don't these aren't really concerns. It's just this is curiosity. Um in looking at the hero's journey, and I was really looking at that part up on the upper right, where it was about refusal to start or whatever to. Um, so as you have reflected on your experiences, how did you? I mean, was it always clear that you were never going to refuse to go on that journey, or did you really? Were there times when you wouldn't have thought that you had the strength maybe or to sort of do that to go on to accept the call for the journey. I'm just wondering if you can remember what that was like and maybe what sparked that for you, because I think some people might be overcome by whatever the experience they had and that they're just ready to stay stuck in that. So go ahead, Dwayne, if you want to talk about that.
That's a great question, Michael. And the thing about refusing the call to adventure, we all do it. I did it all through my teens, mostly because of conditioned beliefs and fear of becoming a different person. So when I talked about the conflict between two identities, my one identity was the religious, you know, um, very structured kind of life as I was conditioned as a child and brought up in. I didn't go into my mother's OCD and her own mental health issues, but they were a very big part, an informative part of how I constructed my identity. But then there was also the, you know, blossoming uh, gay side of me, the gay young person who was coming out, especially, you know, at the age of 11 when the sexual abuse started. So there was that outside world that was abusing me psychologically, physically, emotionally, and everything, which was forming that construct and identity. And those two were kind of battling as I moved into adolescence and my teenage years. I refused to call to adventure, refused to step into my authentic self as a gay man and get out of that conditioned society or belief system. And which led to me trying to commit suicide. I was fearful of what lie on the other side. One, mostly because I didn't have a mentor to guide me. I didn't have anyone I could reach out to. I didn't have friends that could guide me in that way, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. But also, I mean, I did. I just wasn't aware of it. I just want to correct that. I did have those people, and those people came out of the woodwork. One of them was on the call earlier, Nancy. She has been my friend since 1988 when I graduated high school, and she helped me walk through the suicide attempt when I was 19. After I got out of the hospital, she was there as a friend, a mentor, and a guide over the last 30 some years. So, but the refusal to the call then was basically because I wasn't willing to step into the authenticity. Ironically, it was the event of trying to commit suicide which really was the metaphorical walking into a very dark cave and really facing a monster. I was not courageous enough to face the monster I felt it was better to relinquish myself to it. Um, that didn't happen because after I had taken those sleeping pills, I kind of woke up from falling asleep in my mother's living room on the couch, and I became terrified of what I did. And I was like, what? And I started to realize I'm not going to hear birds singing anymore, and I'm not going to be able to talk with friends, and I'm not going to be able to eat Reese's peanut butter cups. And I managed to somehow, I don't know how, but I managed to pick up the phone, which back then it was the dial rotary phones, and called my friend Nancy. And sorry if you hear my cat, she wants to participate. And Nancy actually answered the phone. The sleeping pills had caused my tongue to get very inflamed and swollen, so she could barely make me out, but she knew something was wrong. Immediately called the paramedics and came to my mother's apartment, and was able to get in, and get me to the hospital in time. But it was that event and the subsequent time afterwards of Nancy actually as one person, but there were others, who said, "I'm here to support you. I'm going to help you get through this, and you can talk to me. You can, say all." And it really helped build the courage then to accept the call to adventure and to begin to move into that extraordinary world of things that I wasn't aware of. That I can be a gay man and be happy. That I can go through these experiences and come out of them okay on the other side. So that's a very insightful question. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. It- I have a couple more quick questions and I'll pass it along. In terms of like mentors, so you mentioned Nancy. I'm wondering, like in reading about people who have written about the hero's journey or their experience of going through the hero's journey, I'm sure you've read some things. Uh, is it common that as to have like people that you read about being considered a mentor? That was interesting when you said that when you listed some of the people that you've read as being mentors. So
Very
is that
common. In
it
fact,
is common?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Krishnamurti, even though he had passed away many years before, became a mentor. Um, George Lucas unknowingly became a mentor because as you can see from my background, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, the original trilogy, and
Oh yeah.
through
Okay.
his imaginary world that he created on film, it allowed me as a young person, when I was 7 to when I was about 13, when Return of the Jedi came out, if anyone's familiar with Star Wars, I was able to immerse myself in that imaginary world, and I felt safe there.
Mhm.
So George was a mentor because he, in writing the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, utilized Joseph Campbell's hero's journey as well for Luke Skywalker's story and
Ah,
coming of age and stepping into his world, of the extraordinary world, in Star Wars. So there was that fictional element there too. But also Joseph Campbell, obviously, which I've mentioned before. Eckhart Tolle recently, over the last couple of years, several years, has been, and there's others, there's many, many others, but yes, they can be both living and no longer with us. And not just
okay.
human beings, there could be non-human mentors as well.
Sure.
This concept of Gaia, nature, and Mother Earth, that we can find um, certain indications of how we can live our lives and how we can move through trauma. Some people find nature to be very comforting and satisfying.
And a source of wisdom, I
A source of
imagine.
wisdom.
So yeah.
Mhm.
Last question, promise. Uh, in terms of like the actual writing experience, I know that you didn't just like sit down and write this dissertation and never thought about these stories before. It's been a long process of doing this. But I'm wondering, it's not just so in terms of this reflective writing and how it can be powerful, it's not it doesn't sound like the same thing as sitting down to like write a paper, an article, something like that. So how what was it like to revisit and then actually try to not only just sort of get it on paper, but then keep going back to it to revise and get to that point of being, touchingly precise, and keep having to go back to the mental images that the words were bringing up for you. That doesn't sound like it would be something that everyone could handle, or that they would have to approach it in their own way, and maybe, yeah. So anyway, this what I'm just wondering what your experience was
It's
of it.
Yeah, and I mentioned, well, in my proposal, but I think I also brought it into the dissertation. It's really important if one begins to walk down that road of reflective writing and kind of dredging up some of the experiences they've been through, especially traumatic experiences. It's really important to keep in mind and be aware that you're ready to do that. You don't want to re-traumatize yourself. And I had to consider that too. So for me, this process has been happening since 2006, so about 18 years or so now. And I started by writing blogs and just writing down my thoughts and in journals, feelings, that the raw feelings I was having after being attacked. But then I started even going deeper and looking into my childhood experiences and things like that. And as I moved into my graduate program at Sophia, in transpersonal psychology, some of those events started to percolate as academic papers, but they weren't just academic. They were heart, as Ilana will say, heartfelt papers. They were stories that just happened to have an academic edge to them, and it was it's a sitting with those narratives and meditating on them, reflecting on them, sometimes walking away from them for a while, a long time, going out in nature, and also, sharing those stories with friends and family that may have been through those experiences similar, or even witnessed the experiences as firsthand. For my personal life, like Nancy, who was on the call earlier, she witnessed some of those events firsthand and very personally. So I shared a lot of that work with her over the last several years. So in a way, for this dissertation, I've been doing this research for almost 2 decades. And however, as I kind of got choked up a little bit by rereading them during this presentation, you can still, those feelings arise. It's kind of like the folding and unfolding of the lotus flower. The lotus is an amazing plant. It grows out of the mud and the muck, but the beautiful flower that emerges is amazing, and it goes back in and it enfolds, and then it reemerges. And so it's that cyclical spiral that we're re-experiencing, re-relating, and reconstructing how we relate to those experiences through narrative, especially the written word. There are other ways. There are many different types of creative arts that you could utilize if writing isn't for you, like clay and sand play, sand work, painting, dancing, poetry. There's so many different ways that you can express uh, your story through different mediums. So, but yes, that's a great question, and really want to emphasize being careful for anyone who might want to go down the road of self-reflective writing, is the re-traumatization, and be prepared for that. So.
Thank you. Ilana, would you like to go next?
Hopefully my dog won't bark because he's been here barking the whole time, bribing him with treats while we're. Uh, I want to focus on the mentor as well. To me, the memoir aspect of this is a mentoring of sorts, just like George Lucas was a mentoring of sorts. A mentoring for you in a different sort of way. But I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this because it may be a percolation, a dreaming on it event, but how will what you have learned in this process create a mentoring that you will do for others in not necessarily a direct way, but just in the idea of your experience being a mentoring for others?
Well, I take my cue from you. having read your story about your experience with your husband and Alzheimer's and the dream work and all of the symbols that you witnessed and experienced after, well, during and after your husband's passing. And I referenced that in the dissertation as being a very important um, kind of a mentor through the written word. So I've already begun thinking about utilizing um, not a self-help book, but some kind of a memoir, like you were mentioning, um, as a kind of a workbook slash autobiography where you read a story from my life, and then you take a time to understand that story and how it relates to a stage during the hero's journey, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then you have activities that you can utilize and begin to write your own, or you can choose another creative art form to express a story in a certain way. And then I've also um, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, tying the work in with not only eco psychology and eco spirituality workshops, but creative arts workshops, where we maybe do some kind of, we have a small 6 word or 6 sentence memoir activity. And when we have an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours to discuss what we wrote together as a very trusting, safe group of people that work together to help each other through traumas or whatever we decide to write about in a memoir. I really like to fall back on this project that's called the 6 word memoir. It's a website you can go out and look up online, but basically it's people, just everyday people, as well as, famous people who submit little 6 word sentences about something they may be feeling or thinking, and it kind of encapsulates a story. And then you begin the process of unfolding those. So that's the process of SPN, or scholarly personal narrative, is really understanding and unfolding and discovering what those memoirs really mean to you. So there's a lot of other avenues as well. Obviously teaching in a transpersonal psychology program or transformative studies, or even pioneering a program at a university somewhere locally and things like that, or even my own little group of people that might want to learn some online courses and things that I could develop. So it all ties into the adult education piece that I have as a background. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. That's where I'll stop. Thank you so much. And I hope you do one of those things.
If I do all of them, it'd be nice.
Funny.
Well, I have basically two things to say about where you might go from here, building on what I have read. The first thing I want to mention is this poignant portrayal of your relationship to religion. And of course, it's not just any religion, it's right wing, fundamentalist Christian religion. And I would say that it brought alienation to you. And I think the fascinating phenomenon to a sociologist of religion is how religion, which is supposed to be the thing that binds us together, is alienating to some people. And so I think you could make a lot of that. I'd like to read an article in which you take that as a theme, how religion can be how religion can alienate one's soul from oneself, as well as one's person from other people. Because I think that's a fascinating topic. I mean, it's a wonderful topic, and it's so germane to what's going on now, because we find religion being thrown about as a political, I don't know what, a political dagger in some cases, or a political treat in other cases. It's just being debased and degraded in so many ways. Anyway, I think the in-depth look at religion itself and the structures and the functions would be fascinating.
It's ironic that you mentioned that too, because I'm friends with another PhD, Carolyn Baker, who has been writing books basically around the climate situation and how it affects us as human beings, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally. And she has written several books on extreme right wing, especially Christianity, and how it affected her as an LGBTQ plus person. I think she's in her 60s or 70s now, but I interviewed her for my YouTube channel, and she has been one of my idols, and I look to her as a guide. So there's a lot of opportunity there, Connie, to actually do that, and to, from my perspective, to see how, in many ways, had I not gone through that experience with Christianity, especially, I wouldn't be who I am today, and how I was able to transform those experiences into something that was beneficial to me as a human being, an adult, and how I reshaped and wielded those experiences to my benefit. So, because I retain now spirituality, that nebulous word, spirituality, not specifically some kind of dogma or specific fundamental way of looking at the world.
Exactly. Well, that leads to my second point. When I noticed that instead of, when somebody hits you on the head with a hammer, you would tend to say, that's a bad guy. And when somebody abuses you sexually when you're 11 years old, you say, that's a bad guy. I'm not like him. But you went the other way. You said, I am this guy and I'm this other guy. And what is it in me that's like this other person? And of course, what that is non-dualism. And then in addition to that, because you're not othering somebody and saying that person's different from me, you're trying to mine the depths of yourself to find that impulse in yourself, which is what I suppose you would say that Carl Jung did when he said, I will venture out into the unknown and I will find it. And the unknown is myself.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, of course, is, and now that you mentioned who your current mentors are, you mentioned two non-dual teachers, Krishnamurti and Eckhart Tolle. So my question would be, do you intend to develop this notion of moving from dualism to a non-dual frame of reference for your own ontology, for your life's work, for constructing meaning in yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that question, Connie, because I think a lot of people, including myself, initially could be confused with what non-duality might mean. That, in a nutshell, I am the world is me, and really tapping into that unconscious, um, the collective unconscious, and that we're all tapped into and a part of, and it's a universal thing. For me, it's really important to untangle, and it's still a learning process, the desire for the mind, for thought, to keep stepping in. The mind constantly wants to help you condition your beliefs and your point of view, instead of just relinquishing in that and just allowing yourself to be, as Krishnamurti would say, as well as Eckhart Tolle, by centering yourself in the present moment and realizing that this present moment is what it is. There's nothing, you're not struggling right now. If you're in a safe, secure environment, you can be in a place where the present moment reveals all things to you. And once the mind and thought steps in, then you start to see, like I kind of did with when I wrote Krishnamurti into my dissertation, blending thought and the mind with that non-dual state, which is not what he was talking about. And thank you for pointing that out, by the way. And I had to tease those two apart just to make sure that I was clear in my dissertation that self-reflective writing is very much encapsulated within thought and the mind. However, it can be used as a vessel to non-duality, to help us see that, in reflective moments, in meditation, I am that person. I could have been the attacker with the hammer in my hand had the circumstances been different. I could have been the sexual abuser had the circumstances been different. I could have been the parent who was abusing their child emotionally and psychologically in a different situation. So being aware of that really, it's not saying I'm to blame for everything. It's accepting the responsibility of being a human being. I am you and you are me, and I see you through myself. So the non-dual aspect is where that starts to happen, and where we can truly be free, as Krishnamurti would say, free from the known, free from the mind and our thoughts, and enter into a state of um, kind of transcendence above self-actualization, because self-actualization entails thought in the mind as well. So, but transcendence is beyond that, which is more the spiritual aspect of the research that I've been doing. So, great insights, and thank you for
Well,
asking.
you're the one to say it. You can write it beautifully. Thank you, Michael.
All right. So I think that looking at the time, I think it'd be good if for Alana and Connie and I to go into the breakout room now. And we'll be in there for a few minutes, and it gives others a chance to at least say hi to you. And then we'll come
Don't
back
have
in.
to
So
drop.
yeah, so Alana and Connie, you see the little breakout rooms thing, the little
Where is?
squares below?
Oh, I don't.
I see an app. Let's see. Breakout. I don't see a breakout room.
I don't either.
Is
You
it?
didn't
Is
see
there
it.
one that says
No.
more?
Maybe
More.
more.
There
I'll look
is
under
one that says
more.
more. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
more.
there it is. Never mind.
All
Okay.
right. Got it.
Okay, so you just click on your name, and once you open that, and then you'll go into the room.
Okay.
And I will entertain everybody else.
love it.
Other students.
Come here.
Are you able to get into the room, Ilana?
Oh, I'm back.
Try it again.
See, I don't know. Okay, let's see. Again. Um, more. I was there and then I disappeared. Oh, breakout rooms. There we are. Okay. Um, hmm. Join. Got it.
There she goes. I was also I got into that manager mindset. I was like, oh, I'll move you into the breakout room. Don't worry about it. Because
Wait,
I've done
that's
so many
great.
of these Zoom meetings before. It's like, oh my gosh, I'll help you and be that administrator, the technology and troubleshooter. Betty and Zeke and Maria, I see Marla, I see you here. Nikki, Alexander, on. Thank you for joining. Danielle, I didn't, it's funny, Danielle, I see you have joined, and I was watching a recording of a dissertation that you were chair for, and I got all my cues from that dissertation recording on YouTube. And I was just like, if I can answer the questions from Danielle, that I will ace this. It'll be fine. So I want to say thank you for that so much. It was such a blessing to see that YouTube recording. The person, I can't remember her name now, but she had COVID and she was coughing a little bit and stuff. So she recorded her presentation.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Laura.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was just like back in May or maybe or like a year ago or so. But
yeah.
anyway, yes, I got a lot from that recording, so I was so appreciative. It's nice to see you.
To see you. This was a wonderful presentation, and a wonderful defense. And then, like I was kind of personally curious, knowing that you've done some of this work as your master's degree. And I wonder if you can speak to the journey of doing the master's to the PhD. What what expanded, and what new understanding did you get this time around? Telling the story this time around.
That's a great question. In fact, the master's degree, it was very academic for me because I ended up kind of my capstone for the master's was publishing my first academic journal article, where I talked about the experiences that I went through. But it's interesting, and that was more about autoethnography, using autoethnography as a form, the benefits and the therapeutic benefits of autoethnography. Um, I didn't even consider, quite honestly, moving into a PhD, because I actually went on to do a second graduate degree, mostly for my occupation, which was adult education. And however, it just weaves so well with transpersonal psychology, which was the first degree, and really helping other human beings, adults and everything, um, learn more about themselves, and then having that academic mindset as well. So helping people develop and grow. Moving into the PhD, it was much more a process, I think, of myself developing, and not wanting to have that, oh, I can show you or I can be your guide and help you, which I had that more academic mindset in the master's program. Here it was more about, how can I help myself? What can I do to develop myself? Because I feel like I'm still stuck in some of these things. And what can I find or unfold from the process of going through this research, writing the narratives, and discovering more about those little golden nuggets of truth and knowledge and wisdom from my personal stories and my life. But probably more importantly, re-evaluating my relationship to people that I've been through traumatic experiences with, whether they were the abuser or whether they were family members or friends who witnessed that, and really understanding both alive and dead. How do I still relate to those people psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually? Because sometimes, as you know, some of those things percolate in our dreams, and we can re-experience things from different perspectives. The metaphor is there, and if we're willing to dive into that metaphor, we can learn more about, am I continuing to abuse myself by not having addressed my relationship to abusers, victimizers, or people that ignored the situations that I was in as a child and young person, as well as those people who have served as mentors and everything? How do I relate to them now? And not looking at them as mentors, but more as peers now is really beneficial to the whole process of going through the doctorate program. Has been, how do I see other academics and other people that I've looked up to for such a long time? How do I start seeing them as peers and knowing that I'm moving into a sense of expertise in my field, the area that I've chosen to really put my passion into? So that's a great question. It's one of development in a nutshell.
Thank you. And I see why it would make sense then in that case to use SPN, as the method. Uh, and
Well, first I was a little hesitant about SPN.
yeah,
I was going to use autoethnography as the methodology,
I
but
know from BSc, I know, yeah.
yeah, and someone shared it with me, SPN, and as soon as I read the first book around the methodology, it just spoke to me, and it was like a little bird singing in my ear. It said, "This is perfect. This is what you want. This is exactly what you're going to do." And it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of like the pegs, everything landed exactly where it was supposed to. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bravo. I'll let others ask question. And now I have to go to another meeting here, so I just wanted to congratulate
Oh,
you.
thank you so much for joining. It's nice to see you. You were my intake advisor, so I appreciate you.
Same wise. Yeah.
Have a great day. Anybody else? I know we have some. Hi, On.
Hi. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you doing
Oh,
your
thank you.
journey. I know that you touch a little bit on this, but I wanted to ask again to make sure, like, and do you have any advice? Because I am actually transitioning to SPN as well, and I told Marla that, and I was very skeptic before to do that. And I want to ask you, like, how do you maintain boundaries between your personal healing, and public sharing. And
Mhm.
do you ever feel like the need to protect certain parts of your story, to kind of like preserve, for your well-being? And how do you like decide to share and what to share and what to keep private? Because that's something, I
Yeah.
guess, because I'm just transitioning into it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I
Yeah.
don't, and I'm doing entertainment stuff, so I don't want to be
Mm.
full because I'm still working with them.
Mhm.
So,
Of
yeah.
course, sure. Yeah, that's a great question because when I did my first journal article, which was part of my capstone project for my first graduate degree, my first master's degree, I had the goal of publishing the document, the article, but there were a lot of really personal stories in there and very raw, about sexual abuse as a child, psychological, emotional abuse by my mother, things and religion. And the people involved in that were still alive. So I had to really consider who's going to read this, who's my audience, and ultimately, will anyone be hurt if I publish this? And or will it be an opportunity for them to see my perspective? Also, being careful of any kind of personal or private, especially for individuals that were still alive. Most of those people that I shared the stories with from today are no longer alive. However, they are still alive, and I still have relationships to them in my mind and my heart. So it's really important to be able to, first of all, before you even start your writing your narratives, the pre-search part of SPN, sit down and write out, well, just little 6-word sentences or little snippets of stories that you think you might want to share, and then really sit with them for a few weeks or months if you have to, and say, well, there's aspects of this story I want to share, but I don't need to go into the details. Or this story does require that I need to go into details. Being cognizant of those that it may affect, especially cognizant of yourself and maybe re-traumatization, which is the most important aspect of that. Having a secure safety net of people that can support you if you feel that, friends and colleagues that you can share your work with. Send it stuff to me if you want. If you want me to read a story and I can look at it and say, well, my perspective on this, I feel like maybe you should talk to this person if you brought them up in the story before you socialize it with the world. So
Thank you
we
so
could
much.
have a longer conversation about all of that,
I
but
will
there's
hold you to
no,
that.
well, there's ethical things to consider for yourself as well as for others, and being cognizant of that. But if you can establish the boundaries that are good for you and for others, and also create a safety net and a support group of people that you can trust, that you can share those stories with, that you can confide in. They can help you too, not only through making sure that you're sticking to those boundaries, but also the psychological and things that you may experience emotionally as well. So,
Thank you so much,
and
Wayne.
I
That's
think you have a big support group.
you.
From what I've seen on your social network and everything.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm happy and very honored to even have you as my contact. So,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and if you don't have my email address and phone number or anything, just let me know and I can get that to you.
Hey, well, thank you. You're already giving workshops. This is good. And and I just wanted to be the first to say congratulations, Dr. Custer.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, again, already giving workshops under, you can charge more now that you have your PhD. Um, so you've got um, just a few revisions to make, but just like 10 minutes worth of revisions and then onto the technical audit. So,
Mhm.
and you and I can have a quick conversation about exactly what that is later, but
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
super simple.
I've already
Um,
made several revisions anyway, so
yeah,
I'm so
probably.
thankful for
Yeah,
the
and maybe
feedback
be
that
this,
you gave me. Yeah.
and it may be, yeah, what you've already done the part.
Yeah.
Anyway, congratulations. Does the committee have anything else they'd like to say to Wayne?
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. Custer.
Oh, thank you.
Great piece of
Thank you,
work.
Dr. Rowe.
Congratulations. I need to know how I can do what Ann Fan is doing. How do I make? Oh, there we go.
Your background?
Yeah.
Oh, the little
You have to
thing.
update
Oh,
your-
The
yeah, there you
celebration.
go. See, that's great.
Did
It's
it
turned
happen?
off.
Hi.
Zoom turns
Hello.
off the little if you on a
Oh,
Mac you can do balloons and stuff if you have gestures, but I think Zoom turns it all off.
oh.
But they
How
have
do you
their
do
own.
that?
They got
And
the little
It's
rockets.
happening. You could
I'm
just go
on,
like
I
that,
did it.
yeah.
I updated it, so yeah.
Ah,
Congratulations, Wayne.
thank you, Connie. I appreciate you so much. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more in the next couple of months about some things. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, darling.
Well, thank you all.